Okay, good evening. Call the meeting to order here at 6:05. I'll start if getting the adoption of the agenda. Any additions from administration you should ask? No? Mr. Coogan?
I'll move the agenda be adopted as presented.
Motion on the floor, call the question, all in favor? That's carried. And down to 3.1, operating capital budget. Mr. Frank?
Your worship, members of council, Mr. World will take you through the revised changes from last budget meeting. And then we can also discuss the items that are in front of you. Did we put them in? Yeah, we put them in there, but they're a little hard to see, so we gave you a printout copy for you for consideration, and we can go through Mr. World and Mr. Bashan, besides his sickness, worked the last 4 days to prepare a 20-year capital plan. And as you can see, most of the other management staff is out with the flu as well.
Okay. Mr. World?
Okay, Your worship, members of council, you have an RFD. The RFD just kind of summarizes what we changed from last budget meeting. Apologize for some formatting issues. That was my fault. I missed I couldn't get to work properly, and that's why it looks a little bit out of line. Overall for the budget, the expenditure increase, including all the initiatives, is 6.2% in the expenses. If we take the initiatives out, the entire increase is only down to 0.55%, so a little bit less than the 1% mandate under the recovery plan. Transfer to reserves, the surplus that we have left over is $1.622 million, and that's how we balance the budget with that surplus amount. The changes from last meeting, there wasn't a lot of changes. Capital carry forward, that was the thing that I indicated that I had put into the operating budget, and it should not have been in there, for $1.3 million. Sale of graders were added, and also budgeted lease costs were moved to transfer to capital reserves. So we have a transfer to capital reserves in 2024 of $1,012,000. Andre added one additional cost into the budget for $75,000 for engineering on for a permanent repair solution at the Old Ferry Loop, where the McLeod River eroded the banks. He said to, I think, 12.5 meters. We removed the census from the operational initiatives, as we'll carry that forward in the 2003 budget amount. So that's no longer on the list of our operating initiatives. We added the council honoraria as per policy if the staff get that same increase. That was already in the budget, but we just added it to our worksheet of $11,662. We also added approximately $2,000 for flying for the ASB conference. As council indicated, they were supportive of that. And we've added into the capital budget the purchase of 2 graders funded from equipment replacement reserve for $1.35 million.
Any questions from council? Councilor Dean?
Thanks. Through the chair to Andrew. The $1.35 million that's budgeted in 24 for the 2 graders. Is the plan to take those funds out of the capital reserve, the equipment reserve?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Dean, yes. That's how we've budgeted. If you look at your capital sheet, you'll see it's under the reserve column.
Right. So my question, in the RFD from the last council meeting, within the rationale, just going by memory, it said there was approximately $2 million in reserves.
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, the actual amount of reserves that are in the equipment replacement reserve, as per our financial statements, are just over $4.1 million.
Okay, yeah, question answered then. And we're also putting the 412 from the sale of equipment back into equipment.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? I guess just out of curiosity, in the next 20 years, do we have a total on the gauge here as far as how many, or how much you think we're looking at?
We didn't total up your worship, we didn't total up the debenture amount. One of the reasons why we were kind of looking at the airport in terms of the debentures on the airport, so we're showing them as debentures, but we're obviously hoping that those would be different funding sources. If we look at just the debentures on the county side of the equation, not clear, well, airport's the county, but not including the airport, we're actually in pretty good shape in terms of maintaining our debt levels. But when you add the airport into the equation, it puts us quite a different story.
Any other comments, questions from council? Councilor Bros?
Through the chair, so just so I get this right, we've got, like on the very beginning here, we've got a projected cash recovery balance of $18,198,025, right? On the very first page, the small letters page in the printout.
Yeah, yes.
That, and when we talk about the equipment reserves of $4 million and some of this other stuff, that's the total, including the equipment reserves and everything, right?
Yeah, through the chair to Council Burrows, that's all our reserves.
Okay, so we need 12 in operating, for sure. Because we need to fund operations for roughly 6 months before we get paid on June 30th, right?
Yeah, through the chair to Council Burrows, yeah, that's basically correct. We're expecting that we'll have cash balances, of course, well in excess of that. We'll probably be at 12 million, probably when June hits, probably a little closer to 12 million then. We've basically funded most of our cash requirements for the year. We will not have to go into overdraft.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is again, some of these debentures that we're talking about, I really hate borrowing the future and the next council's future for the next 20 years and tying them up with some of this stuff. I understand it's nice to have cash in the bank, but I don't know. I'd rather spend out of reserves than I would debenture the heck out of everything.
Anything else from council? Mr. Wilson,
Sorry, yeah, through the chair to Council Burrows. So one of the things that Mr. Frank and I have talked about it, and I think we've mentioned it to all of council, is that we will be working on a reserve plan. We don't know what level of reserves we should have, and part of that would be contributing to a capital replacement reserve, where you would have, potentially as you put funds away, you would have funds that you would not have to debenture because you would have them in reserves. As part of the whole picture, you have to kind of know what your reserves you need based on a long-term plan. So debenture could come out of capital replacement reserves if you have them in the reserve. And so council may choose to start contributing $500,000 into a reserve every year so that they have the funds available instead of going to debenture.
So to that point, I guess, around developing a strategy around the reserves, what kind of timeline are we looking at for? I know it's obviously that's after this budget, coming in the new year, but I'm just curious, when we might be able to see that.
The plan, I talked to Mr. Frank today, and he'd like it done by May, is what he wanted it done, kind of before the taxation, before we hit the taxation time period, right before we send out the bills, to have that reserve plan kind of in place before we set the mill rate. So April, May.
Councillor Denis, you have.
Through the chair to Andrew, what's the difference between the interest that we earn on, anything that's in any type of a investment vehicle versus the Alberta Capital Finance rate?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, basically right now the number's almost equals.
Okay.
So if I look at a 20-year debenture today, it was 5.35, I believe, or maybe 5.5. And we're making about, on our savings account, we're making about 5.5 to 5.8, depending on where interest rates have been. Last month was 5.65.
And if one side goes down, likely the other side will too. Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Peter, did you have your hand up there?
No.
Okay, just checking.
I just got one other.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Mr. Rose.
on that, in this package through the chair to Mr. World, the package that's in front of us, on the second page, the longer spreadsheet one, there's a funded by debenture column there. Oh, I just answered my own question. Sorry, I didn't see the airport one. Never mind, I'm good. I just was trying to figure out that total. After the, I don't know why I couldn't see that 3.575 there.
To administration, just checking with the presentation we had from HMRO around the developments at the airport. That taxiway echo upgrade, that wasn't one of the ones that was affected by the bombers, was it? I believe it was the echo, the extension.
Echo? No, the Echo wasn't.
Okay, just checking.
A, B, and C are.
So just, again, now to that point, do we know what the cost for those upgrades to A, B, and C are? Like given those ones are gonna be more impacted with firefighting and stuff versus Echo. If we have to venture something, I would rather venture something along those ones to start with and then do the extension after. But that's obviously a discussion for the rest of council. I'm just curious what the costs are.
Your worship, members of council, it's scheduled for 2030 at 1.87 million as per the study that was done by HMR. Those come directly from their report.
Okay. And I believe, are we, this upgrade to Echo, are we still looking, because I think they said there might be some grants and stuff come available. Are we still obviously looking at that before we get this far?
Yeah, your worship, members of council, again, the capital plan has total cost estimate that doesn't include any grants that
Yeah.
we may be
I'm just making sure we're
eligible
still
for.
looking or on top of that.
Yeah, again, the proposal in the airport plan that was done by HMRO is for Woodlands County to speak to the provincial government to see if they're willing to kick in more, because it is a crucial infrastructure for their firefighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else from council? Any more questions, concerns? Councilor Rose.
Anything below that 27 line is at the moment optional. Is that line folded? And I just want to make sure that's kind of the additional stuff.
Sorry, I missed the
So on the
first,
second page of the printout,
This page here.
that folded line between 26 and 27, that's the additional?
Yeah, that's the additional with the,
yeah,
Okay.
that's our wish list, I guess, for their
Right.
wish list.
1.250.
I think we had 875 currently sitting there, and let's see if we have it. Anything else from council? Councilor Dean.
Just through the chair to Andrew, can you just explain the relationship between reserves and unrestricted surplus?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean. So normally what happens, at the end of the year for most municipalities, if they have a surplus, they'll go to council and say, we want to move this into restricted surpluses for capital reserves or equipment placement reserve. And we're actually in a deficit 3 years ago. We actually had a deficit, as you can see, the unrestricted surplus it's a negative. You can't really tell it's negatives there when they're on the far side, but that's actually negative 5 million, negative 10 million.
All right.
Sorry. So we were actually just in 2021, we were still in a deficit. Like, so that means we were running an operating deficit. So last year, we were able to get out of the operating deficit. We had a surplus. That surplus just remained as unrestricted at this point. So they're shown as unrestricted in this presentation, but council may choose to put them into actual reserves.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Daily Councillor Williams, anything you want to bring up?
No, it's nice to see this capital plan though, because there are some big years coming ahead here, like 2026 is a expensive one for us, so that is definitely something to know that's coming is a good thing, because 13 million, I think is what it is.
Yeah, it's a big one there. Councillor Prestige?
No, I'm good. I just want to say that I sure appreciate having the budget done this way, not the big 6-inch binders that we used to have. This is so much easier to understand.
Councillor Burrows?
No,
Councillor Klugen?
I'm good, thanks.
Councillor Dean? Okay, I guess if we had no more questions or comments currently. Motion just to move it for information then?
Well, your worship, members of council, now this comes to the point where if we need direction from council, everything that you see is in the 2024 budget at this point in time with a projected surplus of $1.6 million as well. And do we need to revise the budget, or are we bringing it forward to council for formal adoption?
One question I do have, something that I know we've done in the past, we haven't done in the last little bit through COVID and everything else, is we used to have open houses around the budget so that residents could give feedback, or even we would before sent out even through COVID letters, or had, some where people could at least give us something, and we haven't done, don't remember doing that last year, and we haven't done that this year. Just some of the feedback I have got from residents around our budget process, if there's gonna be any type of, open house or informal session where they can give input or at least talk, and I'm just seeing from administrative, what would that look like to try to set up?
So your worship, members of council, again, the past practice has been once council formally adopts the interim budget, i.e. because your final budget is in April of 2024, you would then, open houses are scheduled for January and February, whatever date council chooses those. And then once we receive the final assessment numbers in March, we do the revised budget and the input from the, what we hear from the ratepayers, and then bring it forth to council for consideration at that point in time, so that you then determine the tax rate going forward. So that's the normal practice, and I know COVID is, but that's what we've done in the past.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Dean?
Thanks. Through the chair to admin, either Andrew or Gord, I guess. The 1.6 projected surplus, does that include the approximately $1 million that's budgeted for doubtful accounts?
That is correct.
Yeah, through the chair to council, Dean.
So it's not 1.6 plus $1 million, it's just 1.6?
It's 1.6, and we've budgeted allowance for doubtful accounts for $1 million. So we budgeted that also. So if we had no doubtful accounts, it would be 2.6 million.
And I believe when I quizzed you about that last week, you said that you expected the vast majority of our taxes to be paid.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Dean. So the 2023 number ended up being very close to 97-98% collection. We've had the Alberta Energy Regulator and some of their new things they're doing to oil companies in terms of making them come to the table. We've had 2 agreements with the oil companies that we thought were going to be uncollectible, and they've come forward, and we've got 2 new agreements. So we believe we've written off already anything that's uncollectible. So unless we see some major downturn in the price of oil, and again, it's if you follow it, if you follow WCS, you can see where we got into trouble just by following the WCS price. When it went down, oil companies got in trouble, and they just stopped paying their bills and went out of business. So it's always dependent upon that. But if we hold steady at, $60 to $70 WCS, I would expect we'll have no problem with our collections from the oil company side.
Mr. Frank?
Yeah, the other thing I think is worth mentioning, we do have a couple oil companies that are on the monthly payment plan. So we have cash flow coming in every month. That's around 350,000, excluding all the other normal payments that we get from our taxpayers, our residents, taxpayers.
Okay. Well, what's the will of council of this? Councilor Dean?
Before I'm ready to entertain a motion to accept it as info, from the operational side, we were going to discuss some of the staffing changes that were being proposed. Is that after a motion?
Your worship, members of council, what I would do is go into closed session, thank everybody for coming on stream, ask the rest of the staff to leave, and then I'll report on that, and then and the only reason why is my thoughts in regards to the positions and stuff, because the positions are being already there, right? And I can give you the details behind that. And then from there, come back out and decide what you want to do.
That works for me, that works for the rest of the council. Councilor Williams?
I just had a question before we do. Are we deciding on these initiatives today, or is that at a council meeting? Do you want to talk about those? Because there's obviously 2 options. We either go up 0.55% or we go up 6.2 or less. Obviously, we don't do all or nothing. But are we looking at making that decision or giving some direction on that today, or is that for council meeting?
Mr. Frank?
Yeah, your worship, members of council, the sooner you can make the decision in regards to going forward, right, is we can prepare it for a formal council meeting to adopt the budget.
Yeah, I think the budget we have prepared though, it's just based on the 3% revenue increase. So that's 6.2, that's just the increase to that side of the budget, but we're still within our 3% recovery plan. So it's not a 3% tax increase or a 6% tax increase, we're still at the 3.
Yeah, but I think if I can,
Yeah.
that's saying whether we approve these other additional items though, is what I guess your question was.
Yeah, that was.
Not how much the budget will go up, but or how much we approve them to spend, I guess.
Councilor Dean?
Through the chair to administration, the budget as presented with the 1.6 surplus takes into account all of these new initiatives?
Through the chair to Councillor Dean, yes, they're all in the budget. They're all sitting in the budget. I think the intent today was to have council look at capital in terms of the 875 and maybe give us some direction in terms of what they wanted to see for the 875, because we're listing kind of the wish list. So from a closing off the budget perspective, we kind of need to close off the loop on what you believe we should have for capital, including the debentures, whether you think we should have 2 debentures or just go for 1 road or. So on the capital side, I think we're looking for a little bit of direction just on those 2 items. And then on the operating side, it's up to council on all those initiatives to determine whether they think they're worth going forward. If you don't go forward with initiative, it's just more money that's gonna go into the surplus and be used for future activities.
So essentially you said yes unless something changes on the financial end of scope of things, but. Councilor Dean.
So when we voted to move the cold mix up the priority scale, we moved 27 and 28 down. And 27 and 28 total 690, which is within the 875. So it suggests we move that back, which is what administration wanted. Those two items, 27 and 28. That's what you're asking, right?
That's correct.
Everybody follow that?
Yeah, to make up that 875.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to spend it, but administration had items 27 and 28 up the priority scale, and we moved it with the understanding that if those funds were available, we'd be able to move 27 and 28 back.
Councilor Prestidge.
Yeah, the Carlson Drive Goose Lake Engineering, I think is more important than the mini excavator is. Because that's, people's yards are getting flooded.
At the point, we have 875, we can throw the, the plow truck, the mini excavator is 690, I agree on that engineering. I mean, that's only 790, that's still underneath that 875. We move those three over to the list, and then the other ones are still on the maybe if funds come in. But I do agree that we gotta do something about the engineering on that road there for those residents, it has to happen. Any answer from council? Or if council's okay, I mean, they're the top three on their wish list, and I think if we have the 875 available, we should make those ones probably more priorities, if that's where they're seeing it should be.
You looking for a motion?
Do we need to do that as, I don't think we gotta do that as a motion.
Yes, your worship, members of council, again, you can do it by motion if you want, and that way you vote on it, or you can do it by consensus then. We're just simply from administration, looking for direction in regards to all these capital items. Right now, they're included in the budget. We've accounted for them. Council has to decide whether or not they become their priorities in regards to that. So at this point in time, and again, I'll go back, that we've spent last year, 2023, $3.875 million. And so that's the funding level that has previously been given to administration. We're recommending I'm just gonna add these up, 4.5 million. Am I right on that? Yeah.
And in the budget presented with the 1.6 surplus, that extra has been accounted for in that?
It's already,
No, Peter Chair, through the chair to your worship, no, that, the only thing in the budget is the 3,875. That's all I've got in the budget.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so that extra roughly $500,000 hasn't been,
That's right, that's not in the budget.
okay. Councilor Prestidge.
Yeah, looking back at these here, that Cut Banks Road construction, if we have another flood next year, that road will be gone completely.
Yeah, I don't know the scope of that if you're looking at me.
That's the cut across the field with the new road.
I think. I don't know what it is.
I would sooner see that go through than a mini excavator.
Please don't wish for another flood, please.
I'm not wishing, I'm just saying, there's a good chance.
No, I agree with that too, so. And then the difference will just eat up that 875. So my feeling, see where council's at, but leave the tandem plow sand truck, the engineering for Carlson Drive and then move the Cut Bank Road construction up. And then that'll put us to just about that 3,875. Might be, you know, a little bit extra. We could do maybe the airshed monitoring or something, you know, for the small portion that's left over. My other question with council is that $3.5 million for debentures for the airport. Do we want to leave that in there right now, or do we want to hold that one off for the upgrade, for the expansion on it, and wait until we see what's available for possible funding from the government first for grants?
Which debenture are you talking about?
The taxiway echo.
3.575.
We gotta get money into the airport somehow, but that's a lot of money. We have other projects in the airport that we need that money more. I'm not sure. Councilor Burrows?
So those taxiway, Echo, is Echo the spot where it goes alpha into what used to be 8.3 and it's that soft spot that's in the middle?
Yes, that first.
Okay. So at the moment, there's nobody down there that needs that PLR. There's nothing planned in that area for development right now. I would say that we need to have a good look at that airport and see how you're gonna develop it,
Before we.
what type of aircraft are gonna be there, and then you're gonna know what PLR you're gonna be to have in the different areas will be. At the moment, I mean, I remember sitting on the airport advisory committee when that whole thing was paved in the first place, and I asked them I said, let's just do it grass. Because nobody needs it right now. Grass would work, but we ended up with, I think, $6.5 million in paving, so.
Just a quick question for you, Steve. I mean, you're out there at the airport. That Echo upgrade, if we bump that a year, is that operationally going to cause many issues you feel out there?
Through the chair, it really shouldn't. We've had an operator down that way question it in the past. But for what we've got going on right now, it's the weak link of that area for future development down there. But for that moment, we have nothing.
We have no development coming up at the
there.
moment. Yeah.
Is it deterring from development? Who's to say?
And for the, Mr. Chair, I'd like to know, like, is everybody comfortable with, I know that in the end, where is this? So if you add everything up for 2024, they're talking about $9 million in capital spending for 24, right? That would include that $3 million at the airport. Like, this is the whole wish list of everything on the 20-year draft capital plan. Like, I'm just looking at 24, 25, 26, 20, 26, 13 million. Are we comfortable going with another 4 million in debenture? Like, I see us quickly running out of room to borrow based on this capital plan. And we don't have any tremendous plans in the next little while to generate more revenue.
The chair to Councilor Burrows. So one of the things in the operating budget, the only one of those debentures is in the operating budget as part of the plan. It's the 2.4 million, not both of them. Just, they were in there, that, we put one debenture in for the boring, and then we figured the next project would be next year originally. Andre may have changed his mind and thinks he can do them both next year, but right now the operating budget only accounts for the one debenture.
So the 2.4 and the 1.85,
The 1.85 is not costed into the operating budget.
not in there yet.
No.
It's on the 20-year capital plan. He must put it in there because it does show up on this sheet.
Originally, he was only planning on doing one of those projects, is what he told me, and so that's how the budget proceeded. And now, if he wants to do that other one, it's about a cost implication of about, for next year, probably $75,000 in debenture costs, if you went forward with the other debenture. So it's not material, but it's not in the operating budget right now.
And the 20-year capital plan on here, I don't see the Tier 4 one on there either, so that 9 million could be 12.
I don't wanna go through all this austerity and then find that we, end up borrowing our way into the future, if you know what I mean. So I wanna be very cognizant of what it is that we're venturing and, there's an old Saturday Night Live skit where it's, budgeting kind of deal. He goes, so if I want something and I don't have the money, what do? I just buy it anyways? And he goes, no, you don't buy it. This is the whole budgeting process.
Yeah. Where is the 2.4 shown?
Funded by debenture. Under the capital projects and acquisition sheet.
So and then when you do a capital spend of say 2.4, you borrow the 2.4, and then it moves over to the operating side for the payments.
That's correct.
So that's kind of how you keep within that 3 million of the capital side, is you're basically shifting the column from the capital to the operating side, but you're still spending money over. So the loan payment's coming out of the operating side. But if we were to spend it cash, it would come out of the capital side.
Through the chair to Council Burrow. So if we did that project, West Mountain Road resurfacing, and we took it out of operating, we would put it, if we wanted to do that project this year, we would have to put it into the operating budget and transfer it to capital, or we would have to take it from reserves. Everything has to flow through to taxes at some point in time. So if you want to do it with current year's, or next year's dollars, then you can put it in your mill rate, and you collect your funds for it. If it's in reserves, you can take it from reserves and you don't have to tax, or you take it from debenture and you tax over a 20-year period or a 10-year period.
Yeah, and just to follow up, so the idea though, in the 5-year recovery, that was that we were only gonna spend 3 million in capital annually. So because you're doing a debenture on this, that's not gonna count as your capital 3 million, so you're kind of free to spend 3 million in other areas, and you're gonna move that debenture of 75 million over to the operating side.
That's correct, yeah, so,
Okay.
so.
I'm just-
shows up in
It's a
operating.
bit of a,
Okay, Councillor Kuhlken and then Councillor Dean.
Yeah, so on that, through the chair to Andrew, so on that particular loan, the principal loan annually would be 120,000 for that 2.4, correct?
Yes. If you do over 20 years, it'd be
Yeah.
120,000 a year.
So, when we look at, I guess when we look at it moving forward, with 26 being, a pretty big year, we're starting to get into that, close to $1 million annually, that'll be just debentures,
servicing the debt.
just the principal, that's not including the interest. And that's, I think, kind of what makes us a little bit hesitant without having any substantial increase in revenue. That makes me really hesitant to say that debenture would be.
Through the chair to Councillor Kuhlken. So one of the things, you're correct, it's an impact, but, so what happens is we don't spend that money.
Yeah.
And so we get interest on our money in our bank. So the cost is basically your payments that you're gonna make over that 20-year time period. And it's gonna add up to more than 2.4, obviously, with interest. But basically taking that asset that's gonna last for 20 years and the taxpayers are paying for it over the life of the asset instead of all today. And so it's a decision you have to make always on who you want to pay for it. And
Yeah.
most capital items that have long-term life, if usually borrowing I'm not against borrowing for it. Obviously, it has an impact because you have limited borrowing. And so that's one of the things that we talked about too, is that we need to come up with, well, how much debt should this municipality have based on how much assets we have? Should it be no more than 15%? Should it be 20%? That's another one of those numbers that need to go with the reserve plan. So council can kind of say, well, we really can't go there because we really shouldn't have that much debt. Whether the limit says 37 million,
Yeah,
that's not, it's up to council to decide what is the kind of debt we should have and how much should we charge to the current taxpayers.
Councillor Dean, then Councillor Prestige.
I'm good.
Right, Councillor Prestige?
Through the chair, I think what we have to understand is how much can this county afford in payments every year? Because that's the important part. We can borrow as much, up to 37 million. How much can we afford to pay back every year so it doesn't affect our budget?
Through the chair to Councillor Prestige, that's definitely the number that you would know. When you're taking a debenture on, it's going to go into your plan a little differently than if you're going to pay out of your cash. So we've already done some little bit of work in terms of doing the payment schedules and trying to match up. And I think I mentioned it, if you take the airport out of the equation, we're not taking on a lot more debt up to, I think it was 2043, slightly more. But when you add the airport costs into the equation, then it's a significant amount of extra debt.
Councillor Coogan.
yeah, through the chair to Bruce. I think, Bruce, this was one of the conversations we actually had at that session we took at RMA. And that is that we really need to have the conversation of, like Mr. World says, what is the life of it, and what should that taxpayer be paying for it at the end of its life? Right? So I think the conversation really needs to be is what debt is are we willing to accept? What is the percentage? I think that's a good place to start. And, that would make me a lot more comfortable as well. Because right now, we're not seeing any kind of a real increase in revenue stream. The only place we're gonna be able to do that is in the mill rate. So it's I'm really torn as to, do we extend this one more year and wait till we have, what we think is acceptable? Or do we just go ahead and do it, or do we ignore it? And I think ignoring it would be a mistake.
I also think if you take a look, say that 2.4 or 1.8 for those roads, if we push it back another year to 24, the end of 24, and we're looking at this again, we're gonna have those roads plus the next set of roads. So you might have the funds, but, pushed back a little bit more, but you still have to do something with it. And then your number for your debenture for that next year might be, that plus the next one, and then you have more debt coming due at the same time. I think unfortunately it's one of those things, we don't have the extra millions in tax assessment and revenue coming in to be able to afford to do a lot of these outright. And unfortunately, on the roadways, if we don't put money back into some of these, and some of these that are over their life expectancy, is just gonna end up costing us more money operationally, year over year, than just fixing it and moving on. But just my thought on it. Just one way or another, maybe we gotta pay for it, we just don't have the funds available.
I actually agree with you. I mean, in the fact that the more you push off repairs, the more expensive the repairs get. That's true. I'm wondering if we can do like a hybrid in here, because like you said, I'm still nervous of borrowing a pile of cash right now. I'd rather see us spending on the cash end. So if we do, and I don't know if we're, the way the budget's in front of us, I can't tell if we're approving both these projects or one of these projects, because the way the, like that one point, whatever is on there for the other road as well, right? Like you're-
And through the chair to Council Burrows, so the way I did the budget, originally I was under the impression we were only gonna do one of these two projects. How it got onto the list up here is priority, it's a priority over these other ones, but maybe if Mr. Frank can speak to this, because I was under the impression we were doing just one project this year and then one next year. So maybe I missed and Andre changed his mind.
No, your worship, if I may. Again, this was put in front of council for consideration. At no time has council, and again, has made a decision on what capital or operating costs are done. We did in our presentation on last week indicate to council that we've only budgeted for the one debenture, which is the 2.4. But there was, and I don't know if Mr. Bashan did indicate that, but there is the economy of scale in regards to the possibility they're close location of each other and do them that way. But again, that was just for council's consideration.
The other thing, I guess, for council's consideration, if we approve the debenture on the 1.8 side in the budget, that 1.6 surplus, how does that affect that?
Through the chair to worship, your worship, so the net impact for next year would be about $75,000 in costs. And for a full year, about $150,000 in costs on a 20-year debenture.
Operationally.
That's right, on the operating budget. So you would have a cost go up in your operating budget in 2025 of approximately $150,000, and that would carry forward for 20 years.
Right, so that 1.6 and a half or whatever we got in the anticipated surplus would be about 1.5 then.
That's correct.
Councilor Prestige?
Through the chair, if we do the one debenture in 2024 and leave the other one till 2025 and try and take some of our capital cash that we have and put against that, so we're not debenturing as much, to me would be a better way to go.
Councilor Coogan?
Yeah, through the chair to council. So what you were speaking of, John, then a hybrid would mean that we would take some, instead of having the complete debenture, we would take some out of reserves and some. And you know, that I think I would probably be more comfortable with. You know, if we could do that, and then, you know, if we knew what the savings were, you know, if you would have it, because of the economies of scale, you know, that may shrink that down a little bit too. I would be more comfortable with the hybrid myself.
Quick question, and I'll get to Councilor Dean. If we put both of these projects on the list when we get time to where we'd have to pass a borrowing bylaw to debenture these, would administration be able to give us options as far as, you know, if we pulled out of reserves instead, you know, instead of debenturing the whole thing, have that conversation around the time when the project comes due?
Your worship, through to all of council, yes, so these projects would be engineered, ready to go for April, May timeframe, you know, tender. At that point in time, we would know final pricing. We have to prepare, again, the worst case scenario for that. So we're using these numbers as a debenture, right? And then at that point in time, you could have those options available. So if the price goes in, you have to change your debenture bylaw. If the price goes lower, you can lower your debenture bylaw too, because it says you can borrow up to a maximum of, right? So that's where it allows us to borrow less, right? But you guys would know the pricing, because you would have to approve those tender projects.
Yeah, so
Just, if I could just add, your worship, so when you talk about savings, you have savings in interest costs, but you have losses on interest revenue off the reserve amount you take out, and it's basically gonna be the same number, because we're making as much as we're spending on the debentures. So to me, there's no savings by doing this. The purpose of the debenture is to really make sure you're passing on that cost of that road for the next 20 years. That's kind of the purpose of it. And taking it out of reserves is actually, you're paying for it out of today's dollars. And we lose interest on those dollars too, right? So it's basically a wash from the cost perspective. So it's kind of a philosophy. I know Councillor Burrows does not like to borrow money, so it is a philosophy. And that's why I say you have to kind of decide what's your philosophy on debt and how much are you willing to take on.
Go ahead, Councillor Rose.
And I think that's actually a really value. I know I'm the guy saying, like, I'd like to pay for this stuff cash. The purpose that, I've had conversations with councils, and some of them say that doing reserves, you're collecting taxes based on tomorrow's money, you're kind of funding tomorrow's operations on today's taxes. And you're actually putting people further behind, and maybe in this inflationary environment that we're in, it's not the right way to go. And we need to sit down and really have a good look at how to do this. All I know is that when I got on this council, we had debentured a lot of the roadways, like, and I think West Mountain and East Mountain Road is in there, and we're still paying debentures on West Mountain and East Mountain Road in some areas, because those were 20-year debentures as well. And we are now putting another debenture on top of that one. So when you start compounding on top of, and I can't figure out how to get that big picture in front of council so that we understand, how we're paying for things. And you're right, on the way the current structure is, we'd have a fixed borrowing cost if we put the debenture in at 5 point some odd percent. Interest rates are probably not going anywhere for the next several years. I would actually think we're probably gonna stick around where we're at, just to try and keep inflation in check. But cost-wise, it's a wash, but, how are we gonna fund a lot of these projects is the problem. And how do we end up not spending, or like getting used to a lifestyle we can't necessarily afford as a municipality? That's what I'm worried about. When I look at this 20-year capital plan long out, there's some huge expenditures in there, and there are some huge expenditures that need to happen. And even when we get to our cold mixing program, I think a lot of our roads have to go backwards. I think a lot of our roads actually have to be in some ways reconstructed so they've got proper compaction underneath the roads and they're made up of the right materials, so that whatever you put on the surface is going to hold up. So there's a lot to this discussion.
Mr. Frank?
Yeah, and I just have to correct Councillor Burrows. There is no debenture on any of the roads. The financial statements always have to identify our long-term debt. We have water and sewer extensions that are due in June of 31, 30, and 31 for approximately 2.2 million, and then the county admin and workshop expansion for 2.6 million, and then the Laxane Foundation for 1.7, almost 1.8 million. And they're all due in 30, 31, or 32. So there is no roads on our long-term.
I thought in the last report we had one.
That was that new debenture that we just passed for.
Horse Creek.
The Horse Creek one.
Yeah, that's the newest one.
BNC Road, yeah, they'll be in this year's financial statements at the end of the year.
Councillor Prestige.
Through the chair. I think we have to look at too is, do these roads actually need to be done? I know we have a lifespan of the road, but I really think we have to look
Find
at,
that report.
how
that
bad
was
is the
presented to
road?
council.
do we have to spend
When was it? Last year.
$2.4 million
When was
on
the
it right
report?
away? We look around at some of our provincial highways and everything, these roads are like beautiful compared to them. So, before we start spending all this money, I think we really have to look at why we're spending it.
It was a report. Yeah, your worship, through to Councillor Prestige, there was a report that was presented to council in 2021 in regards to all the condition of your payments, and these are based on that recommendation, right? Again, if you remember HM Arrow's presentation on the airport, the longer you leave stuff before you repair it, the higher the cost comes. There's that crossover, and that's where the lifespan of these roads have been come to their end of their lifespan, and they should be paved or yeah. We can look up the actual.
Councillor Dean.
So, lots of good information. I want to come back to what Mr. World said. You asked a question about the effect to the net surplus. The debenture of 1.85 would result in
Probably 150.
a decrease to about 1.5 in surplus.
To the chair, to Councillor Dean, so for the half, because it's only gonna be half year next year, so 75 in our 24 budget, but in 2025, it'll be about 150,000 estimate.
And
You can do that.
just because we, I guess, have these on the list also doesn't mean when we get to that point that we are doing the work or venturing it at that point also, so those conversation will come up again. Councillor Dean?
What I'm kind of sensing though is that we'd like to look at one year and one the next. Am I reading that right? And so which one? Which one do we want to move over to the next year?
Now, for me, my opinion is if both those roads are in a condition that need to get done, and we have another list coming up next year, we might want to take a look at, well, what we can do to do these this year.
So 150K on 2 million, so we'd be looking at about somewhere between 350 and 400 to net operating for 25 to do both.
Probably.
Yes, that's correct, that's about approximately right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when we get 25, we have another $4 million on that list. I guess it's flowing.
25.
Council?
I'm waiting for my aha moment.
Well, I guess if we start off, we'll go with that 875 list, just for when we get around coming to the end of this. So council had discussion on keeping the plow truck, scratching the mini excavator, and then working on the Goose Lake engineering and the Cut Banks road construction. So we want to add those ones to it, and then the other ones are going to be on a maybe list depending on how funds roll. I guess we'll move down to taxiway echo debenture. Do we want to leave that on here or move it? I would probably just move it for now, but it's looking like the majority saying we're gonna take that one off for this year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one's off. Now, the two debentures, and again, we're not approving the debentures currently, just moving the projects. Do we want to leave both of those on there until we get further information for now?
I don't want to.
Mr. Frank, say.
Yeah, your worship, sorry, and I don't mean further information. We would go and prepare the engineering and tender amount, and then council would then ultimately decide whether or not to approve the project, right?
Yeah.
So from a budgeting perspective, they're either in or they're out, because we don't want to do the work if they're out, right? If they're in, we'll do the work.
Okay, I guess, Councilor Coogan?
Yeah, so, through the chair to Gord, so if we find out that there's a substantial savings in economies of scale, like Andrew had mentioned, then, you know, then we can really make that decision a lot easier as well at that time. But if it's in there, it's in there.
No, ultimately, council has the final say when the tender comes in. All
Okay.
we're doing is
Okay.
preparing the engineering and the tender work, right, again. So just because these capital items are in the budget doesn't necessarily mean they're all being spent. Council still has to approve the items that are over $100,000,
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that then.
So
Yeah, leave them both in then.
I would, like I said, I would leave them.
we're
in
just doing
because-
the legwork.
Yeah, okay.
Because there could be savings, and we ultimately, you're gonna end up having to do the repairs. But if we can, you know, look at how we cost them or how we do that before the project's approved, I mean, we still have time to have this discussion all over. Councilor Williams?
Horse Creek Road is a perfect example of that. The original cost estimate was around $4 million and we did it for 1.9. Because they were in the area, there were some other things going on, so leaving it in, I don't think is a bad idea. If for some reason it comes in super low,
This doesn't tie us to the project currently, so.
I would leave it
So, I guess, other than the, okay, so the other changes, I guess, crossing out the taxiway and our list on the 875. Any other discussion from council on that?
So
Councilor Burrows?
was the mini excavator in or out?
Oh,
Out, okay.
yeah, we're gonna remove the mini, well, it'll go to a maybe list, I guess, depending on how funds roll in.
Go for a rented list?
We're not gonna budget for a mini
Okay.
excavator, so it's either in or
It's
out. Again,
Mini excavator's out. You got the plow truck, 'cause we're gonna stick that 875, plow truck, Goose Lake Engineering, and the Cut Banks Road Construction. I know that's gonna come in under that 875 a bit, so I guess that gives a little extra if something else comes up, or if one of these smaller ones like the airshed monitoring or come in.
again, we're not budgeting for it unless,
Okay, so
Council.
500, where are we at? 5, 6,
So we don't know exactly what that road
850.
construction's gonna be.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's only 25,000 left over, so we'll leave the other ones out for now.
so you're at 850 with the
With the
plow
three
truck, the engineering, the cut bank construction.
And we're trying to keep to the 875 currently, so we'll leave it at that, and then there's 25,000 if we have for something else that comes up or we've been overrun.
So are you you're out in the airshed
Out on the
monitoring?
airshed, out on the
Okay.
taxiway, out on
Okay.
the CCAM, out on the
Okay.
infrastructure shop improvements, and out on the mini excavator.
You got that, Andrew?
That's, sounds about right to council?
So
Okay.
we're good on the two debentures and
Yep.
we're good on the other ones, right?
Yeah, and we're crossing off.
Right
the
up
other
until we get estimates.
We're good until we get the pricing.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I guess we'll move on to the other part we gotta go in camera on. Given the time, it's been an hour, if I can get a motion, we'll go into camera, we'll take a 10-minute break, and Council Prestige?
I'll make a motion that we go in. What is it called?
Close session.
VoIP 17, please.
FOIP 17.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor, to go into closed session under FOIP 17. Call the question, all in favor? That is carried. When we, I guess, are we gonna turn the streaming back on, Mr. Frank, when we come back in, or?
I guess, your worship, members of council, only ask the question of the operating budget has some additional initiatives, i.e., the list that you have in front of you, is council going to make any decisions of whether it's in or out, right? Because right now they're in, so. So if you're gonna make that decision, I would then ask Mr. World to stick around later, and then
I think our intent is to make a decision on some of this when we come out, so.
Okay,
Whether we
then
get
I'll-
there or not, we gotta have a discussion, but I don't wanna keep administration around too long if they don't have to also, but.
so the,
We'll need
I
to come
don't,
back at it.
I don't believe we'll be too long with the proposed staffing, so I think 20 minutes myself, so let's say a half an hour.
Okay, so, we'll take a break, come back at 7:20 and Okay, a couple minutes earlier, we said everybody back here ready, so we'll go through the operating portion and we'll see where everybody sits. We'll start with the ERP, Integrated Financial System, which is obviously the upgrade to our software that's coming to end of life. I'll just ask anybody, see an issue keeping that in there.
That's it.
Next two lines are equipment operators. We're using contract operators and they wanted to basically have full time to fill those spots. So I'm contracting it out. Any issues there? 3% salary wages increase for basically COLA, cost of living, any issues? Okay, keep that one in. This one here was the debenture payment, the increase, and this was on the 2.4 million, I believe it was. And we said we were gonna keep that in for the debentures, so I'm assuming this line should stay in too then. Community groups, facility grants.
Yep.
C note 1, it was just kind of around where we're at. I think did we reduce that line, was it?
From 2023, so with a small reduction in
Okay,
that.
any issues or concerns there? The airport certification, this was something that Steve was saying we put off to the point that it has to get done now, so I really don't think we should be pushing this one off. Any concerns with leaving that in? Not seeing any? Individual halftime to help out with ECDev and protective services. I'll fill that position. Any concerns there? Not seeing any. Transfer to equipment replacement reserves. This was towards funding for the 2 new graders, $300,000 going into the reserve. Any concerns there? Not seeing any. The position for the assistant CAO, kind of working towards that succession planning. Obviously, we'll have more discussions later on. Any concern with leaving that in? No? Okay, get that in there. Director of Community Services, obviously kind of tied in with the other one, but we're looking to possibly fill in that role depending on how things play out. Any concerns with leaving that there? Oh, leave that there. Money towards municipal rebranding. So I think that was, Mr. Frank Weddle was in the municipal rebranding, or Corinne, if you could.
Municipal rebranding project. It's the consulting and the scope, community engagement, focus groups. It's a lot of work to see what the municipality wants as a rebrand, and then it includes some design aspects on the front end.
Okay, so kind of updating our image. Any concerns there? No. Okay, move down. Camera flushing camera sewer lines for the Fort and Blue Ridge area. And that was something that's identified that's added schedule. Any concerns with those? Not seeing any. Move down. Coal Mine Hill down the slope. This was a bunch of the cleanup and stuff from the debris that was put down there. Any concerns for cleaning up our backyard? Not seeing any. Extra money going to the Woodlands Library Board. Part of this was new programming around the needs assessment. Any concerns with putting some more into our library? No. Art and culture grants to organizations. This was just bringing the level back up to the 2019 level from 5,000 back to 10. Say this is for our organizations that are applying. Any concerns? No. And then last one on the list was recreational grants. Again, moving them from 10,000 back to 20,000. Just getting the levels back up to where we historically have had. Any concerns there? Not seeing any either. So we've got basically your operational list. No concerns with currently, Mr. Frank. I guess with that information and the changes to the capital portion of things, coming out of closed session or two, somebody want to make a budget to, or make a motion to move the adjusted budget to council for consideration.
Yeah, I can make that motion. So I'd move the council accept the 2024 operating and budget as discussed and amended as information.
Motion on the floor. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. Call the question. All in favor? There you go. Can't wait to see what you guys got for us when it's all put together. And thank you very much for everything you guys have got here. It's been a lot of information, a lot of numbers, and really nice format. Coming down to the end, one more motion.
Nope.
Oh, I'll give it to you. You look really excited. Motion to adjourn. Motion on the floor, call the question. All in favor? And we are adjourned at 8:23. Thank you, everybody.